the lessons you learned from that investigation and how it might affect the way you proceed in these waning months here.
I don't want to compare. I don't want to make that comparison. I was there, and you were on the case as usual, and this is not a retrospective. The 110th Congress isn't over. We're starting our work, and then we're doing it in a period where the Congress is in recess. I'm calling everybody back. We've got a huge amount of work to engage in, and because I don't have the appropriate radio to hear the program at 8 o'clock in the morning, I'm happy to be invited on because I don't have to wait till this evening until the releases come out at 11:30 to read what all of you said. So this is a wonderful service to me, and I'm grateful to you for it. But I am not here to tell you what it was like with Iran Contra, and I know you know it well, but this isn't a history lesson we're in.
Let me put this question to Ron Suskind. Yesterday we went through the responses of everyone from Condoleezza Rice to George Tenet to Rob Richer, and I want to know what he would have to say if he was put under oath. Now, he responded to your book. He was one of the people you interviewed by saying, he's former head of CIA's Near East Division, I never received direction from George Tenet or anyone else in my chain of command to fabricate a document from Haboosh as outlined in Mr. Suskind's book. So tell us about what he actually said to you.
Richer went through letter and verse on the Haboosh mission, the reaction of people inside of CIA, his recollection specifically of Tenet getting the assignment, turning to him. He talks about, hey, Marine, you're not going to like this. Tenet clearly is sort of holding it out like a fish that's rotting. He passes it to Richer. He knows that this is something that down the ranks they're not going to be too pleased with. Tenet is following orders. That's certainly the take that Richer has at this point.
He says he remembers a cream-colored letter, like stationery from the White House?
Absolutely. I said, talk about what exactly you remember, and I put that on the transcript, which I put up on the Internet so people can see as I'm pressing him, not for what he thinks or not for what he supposes, but exactly what he remembers. He says he's sure it's from the Vice President's office. I said, why? He says, I'd bet my career on it. Everything was coming from those guys at this point. Go check this, go do this, some of it fanciful. I said, well, certainly in terms of specifically a disinformation, a lie, they hadn't done a deception. He says, no, that's what made this different. I said, but do you know specifically it was from the Vice President? He said, no, what I know is it was from the White House. George said, this is from downtown. Downtown means the White House.
George Tenet,
George
the CIA
Tenet.
director.
Richer saw the stationery. You know, and the fact is that Richer then talked to others inside of CIA about this specific mission, including one of the deputies who ran the Iraq division, John McGuire, who, of course, is in the book as well.
Who gives the same kind of comment, not within my chain of command, was I told.
Right, but the fact is that it's never within McGuire's chain of command, so he's answering something that's not being alleged. When it comes to Richer, there's fuzzy words about who fabricates. Well, the fabrication happens way down the ranks. That's actually a specific act. The chain of command issues are very legally narrow. Ostensibly, this is the kind of thing written very, very carefully with a lawyer involved, which doesn't really answer well, the many, many things that are in the book as to the specifics of what is not alleged. The evidence is in the book. And the fact is that it's not a matter of a passing conversation. We had many conversations on this specific issue, on the Haboosh matter, with all of the key sources. There was never any mystery about what it was, what the Haboosh letter was, what the Haboosh mission entailed in terms of the setup of the Iraq intelligence chief. I mean, exhaustive, hour after hour. And the way I do it as an investigative reporter is you go back again and again and again.
Did they get Haboosh to sign it?
No, interestingly, McGuire talks about this. He's really the expert in Iraq. He's a real American hero guy. He's been to Iraq many times, and
he's in Iraq now.
Well, he's not in America right now, but but the fact is that he talks about the fact that in his discussion with Richer, he's like, it's ridiculous. Haboosh isn't going to want to sign this thing. He's too smart for that. He's the intelligence chief of Iraq. He's a guy like us. He knows if he were to sign a letter that was truly authentic, all right, in his own hand, if you will, that his family could face real trouble. He has relatives, extended family still back in Iraq. If he's seen as actively supporting the United States, at this point he's seen as missing, his family could be in trouble. And he wouldn't do anything, that disastrous for him, even though we paid him the $5 million. The sense from McGuire, again, he's not handling it. He's just discussing it with Rob when he first hears about it, and then McGuire's going off to a new assignment. It's passed down to his successor, who runs Iraq for CIA. McGuire says...
Richter's new assignment, of course, is Vice President of Blackwater.
Well, he's actually now working mostly with King Abdullah of Jordan as his main job. But he's a guy with connections all through the government and has briefed Congress many times. He's a credible guy. He's been around. He was also a character, a minor one, in my last book, The 1% Doctrine. I've known him for many years. But interestingly, McGuire says we're probably just going to have to fabricate it ourselves, get someone to write it and then just deliver it. And John McGuire and I talked at length about that. Now, McGuire's not involved in the actual, fabrication and execution of this, but McGuire is a pro, very good at this, and he looked at the optics of it, so to speak, right at the start and said, well, we're probably just, to Richer, we're probably just going to have to, have somebody do it. And McGuire, of course, is delighted he's not going to be the one who has to do this ugly work.
But what does that say about the quality of the work that was done? That they produce a letter that the principal has not signed, and that other reporters then they leak it to reporters.
Well, of course, the principal, they'll have someone sign it as Haboosh. It's someone else will do the handwriting. Right. But
Haboosh is paid $5 million to be silent, not to comment on this.
Of course not, and that's the sense. Haboosh will stay silent. He's not going to give us any trouble. But mind you, what's interesting is that McGuire's view, and we talked at length about this, is that this was an amateur hour, an order from the White House, and he says Tenet should have pushed back. Tenet, remember, George Tenet is not an intelligence man. He was a staff man in the Senate. He's really sort of a staffer politician sort of guy. And inside of CIA, even though he became the director of CIA, there's a separation between people who really have done CIA operations for decades and Tenet, who really doesn't have real acuity for that. So McGuire talks in the book, and it's a quote, people who read it, he says, I wish George had more experience in actual operations like some CIA directors, because he could have told his bosses in the White House, this is a bad idea. Haboosh is never going to sign it. We don't think this is such a good plan. But Tenet doesn't push back. And as he said, that's one thing McGuire says we blame George about. Other directors might have pushed back. George didn't. Instead, he took the assignment, passed it down the ranks, and CIA executed.
And, of course, George Tenet denies this and has responded to your book saying that it is not true.
Well, he says, to the best of my recollection, and that's something reporters in Washington know is a classic George move.
And now say what exactly the letter says.
The letter says that it's a letter, sort of a personal letter from Haboosh to Saddam, again dated July 1st, 2001, and it talks about the fact that Mohammed Atta has been in Iraq training for the upcoming mission, which is not named but sort of suggested. Obviously, it's 9/11 that they're suggesting, and he is trained, in and around Abu Nidal, who of course is ostensibly hiding in Iraq at this point. There's some talk, sort of flowery language about the great mission ahead and and its righteousness. That's one major part of the letter, and again, it's only all together really in just a very short space of a few paragraphs. And then there's talk about Saddam buying yellowcake uranium from Niger with the help from a small team from the Al-Qaeda organization, which they throw in ostensibly for good measure. What's interesting is that what really undid them here was the overreach of the assignment from the White House. Again, as McGuire says, and others in CIA I'm sure agree, it was amateur hour. CIA wouldn't have come up with an operation like this. It was clearly something they were ordered to do from the White House, which had a kind of ham-handedness to it. That overreach, the desire of the White House to solve all of its problems, really doesn't fit with how actual deceptions are run. CIA actually does this sort of thing.